You're sitting at your kitchen table in Norwood Park Township, Illinois, on the night of December 21st, 1978. There are 6 Des Plaines police officers in your driveway. The youngest of them is 26 years old. They have a search warrant for your house. Underneath the floorboards on which you are currently sitting, in the crawl space directly below your kitchen, are the partially decomposed bodies of 29 young men. 4 more are in the Des Plaines River. None of them have been reported as connected to you yet. None of them ever will be while you are still living a free life. In the next 4 hours, the senior officer at your kitchen table will smell something through your floor that he cannot identify. In the next 10 days, they will pull 26 bodies out of the crawl space. By 1994, you will be the most photographed serial killer of the 20th century. This is your life as John Wayne Gacy, and the 33 boys whose names you are about to hear. You are born on March 17th, 1942, at Edgewater Hospital on the north side of Chicago. Your father is John Stanley Gacy, a Polish-born machinist with a violent drinking problem. Your mother is Marion Robinson, a pharmacist who will spend the next 40 years being beaten by your father and never report it. You are the second of 3 children. You are the only son. You are slow, soft, sickly, and overweight from the age of 4. Your father calls you a sissy. He calls you a queer. He calls you a mama's boy. He hits you with a leather razor strop at the dinner table for crying. By the age of 9, you have already learned to flinch when he reaches for his belt. By the age of 11, a neighborhood contractor named Charlie has begun to molest you in his pickup truck. You do not tell your mother. You do not tell anyone. You bury it. You are 11, and you are hit by a swing in a playground. A blood clot forms in your brain. The doctors do not find it for 4 years. During those 4 years, your father accuses you of faking the seizures for sympathy. He calls you a phony. By the time the clot is dissolved with medication, you have begun to construct a private rule about pain that will never leave you. The rule is that what is inside you must never be visible. You are 19, and you drop out of high school in 1961. You drive west to Las Vegas with 1 suitcase. You take a job working night shifts at a mortuary. You sleep in a cot above the embalming room. You will tell a girlfriend in 1972 that this is when you first lay down inside a casket with a corpse for company. You will not say what you did or did not do. You return to Chicago in 1962. You enroll at Northwestern Business College. You finish in 9 months. You are hired by Nunn-Bush Shoe Company as a management trainee. They send you to Springfield, Illinois. You join the Jaycees there. You shake every hand at every meeting. You are voted Outstanding Vice President. You meet a woman named Marlyn Myers, whose father owns 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken franchises in Waterloo, Iowa. You marry her in September 1964. Her father offers you a manager job at his Waterloo restaurant. You accept. You move to Iowa. You are 24 years old, and you are managing 3 KFC restaurants in Waterloo by 1966. You have 2 children, a son and a daughter. You join the Waterloo Jaycees. You are voted chaplain. You are voted Outstanding Vice President again. You hire teenage boys to work the fryer. You invite them to the basement of your house on the pretense of showing them a new pool table. You give them alcohol. You give them pornography. You assault them. You tell them no one will believe a word against a man who has shaken hands with the Iowa governor. For 2 years, not a single one of them tells anyone. In August 1967, a boy named Donald Voorhees, 15, finally tells his father. His father is a member of the same JC chapter as you. His father goes to the police. You are charged on May 10, 1968, with sodomy of a minor. You hire a hitman from inside the Black Hawk County Jail to attack Donald Voorhees and prevent him from testifying. The hitman is also a state informant. The state adds a second charge. You plead guilty. You are sentenced to 10 years at the Anamosa State Penitentiary. Your wife divorces you on the day of your sentencing. She takes both children. You will never see either of them again. You enter Anamosa on December 3rd, 1968. You are 26 years old. You are a model prisoner for 18 months. You volunteer for every committee. You manage the prison kitchen. You enroll in 16 college courses. You earn a high school equivalency. The Iowa Parole Board, looking at your file, sees a nonviolent first offender, a college graduate, a former Jaycees Outstanding Vice President. They do not see the man Donald Voorhees described. They release you on June 18th, 1970, after 18 months of a 10-year sentence. You are 30 days into parole when you are arrested in Chicago for grabbing a 15-year-old boy by the neck at a bus station. The charges are quietly dropped. The Iowa parole office is not informed. You return to Chicago. You move in with your mother. You buy half interest in a corner ranch house at 8213 West Summerdale Avenue, Norwood Park Township, in October 1971. The crawl space is 28 inches high. You will spend a great deal of time there. You start a contracting company in 1972. You name it PDM Contractors. The letters stand for painting, decorating, and maintenance. You print business cards. You hire teenage boys at low wages. You tell them they will learn a trade. You drive them to construction sites in your black 1971 Oldsmobile. Some of them will work for you for years. Some of them will work for you for 2 days. Some of them will get into the front seat of the Oldsmobile and never get out. Number 1, Timothy McCoy, 16, Michigan, January 3rd, 1972. You meet him at the Greyhound bus station on Randolph Street in Chicago. He has a transfer ticket to Omaha and 3 hours to kill. You offer him a tour of the city. You buy him dinner. He sleeps on your living room floor. You wake him at 5 in the morning standing over him with a kitchen knife. He reaches up. The blade is already in his chest. You will later tell 2 psychiatrists that he had walked into your bedroom holding the knife. You will tell a third that you had panicked. You will tell a priest at confession in 1973 that you had wanted to know what it would feel like to watch the light leave a person. He is buried in the crawl space the same morning. You wash the kitchen floor. You go to 9 o'clock Mass at St. Pascal's. You take communion. You will later describe this morning to FBI agent Robert Ressler as the morning you discovered who you actually were. You wait 19 months before you do it again. You begin in 1973 to drive to the male hustler bars on Bughouse Square downtown 3 nights a week. You park the Oldsmobile across the street. You pretend to read a newspaper. You watch Which Boys Are Alone. You begin to learn the difference between a runaway and a son. You begin to learn which ones nobody is looking for. You marry a second wife in 1972. Her name is Carol Hoff. She is divorced with 2 daughters. She knows nothing about Iowa. You do not tell her. She moves into the Summerdale house with her girls. You begin to keep a small lockbox of your own under the bed. You begin in 1973 to bring boys home, only on nights when she is at her mother's. You begin in 1974 to keep her away from the crawl space. You tell her there is mildew. There is not mildew. You are formally pardoned by the state of Iowa in October 1975. The pardon does not erase the record. It restores your civil rights. The Cook County Sheriff's Office does not flag your file. You begin to volunteer with the Norwood Park Street Lighting Committee. You become a Democratic precinct captain in 1975. You photograph yourself with Rosalynn Carter on May 6, 1978. The photograph is taken at a Polish American Day parade. The First Lady is wearing a light blue suit. You are wearing a Secret Service pin. You are smiling. The photograph will run on the front page of every newspaper in America in January 1979. You begin to perform as Pogo the Clown at children's hospitals and birthday parties in 1976. You design the makeup yourself. You sharpen the corners of the mouth into points. A real circus clown will tell investigators in 1979 that no professional ever sharpens the corners because it terrifies children. You do not care. You are not Pogo for the children. You are Pogo for yourself. You kill 32 more boys between July 31st, 1972 and December 11th, 1978. They come from runaway shelters on Clark Street. They come from male hustler bars on Bughouse Square in downtown Chicago. They come from the Greyhound terminal on Randolph. They come from your own PDM crew. You drive them to Summerdale in the Oldsmobile. You feed them. You show them a magic trick involving a pair of handcuffs you bought at a magic supply store on Belmont Avenue. You ask them to put the handcuffs on themselves. They do. You tell them the secret of the trick is that you have to keep the key. They laugh. They are 15 years old. They are 16 years old. They are home for the summer from a community college in Michigan. They are working a paper route. They are waiting for a Greyhound to Wisconsin. You take them into the bedroom. You strangle them with a knotted length of clothesline you have begun to call your rosary. You count out loud as you tighten it. You time how long it takes them to stop. The shortest is 38 seconds. The longest is 4 minutes and 20 seconds. You bury 26 of them under the floor. on which Carol Hoff is sleeping. You pour quicklime on each of them. You cover the lime with concrete dust. You begin to keep a notebook in the lockbox under the bed. The notebook lists no names. It lists only ages and the time it took. By 1978, the crawl space is so full, you have begun to throw the last 4 into the Des Plaines River, off the Interstate 55 bridge at 3 in the morning. The Cook County Police investigate the disappearance of John Butkovich, your 17-year-old PDM employee, in August 1975. They knock on your door. You invite them in for coffee. You tell them Butkovich quit on a Tuesday and walked off with a week of unpaid wages in his pocket. The detective writes that down. He thanks you for your time. Butkovich is 2 feet below the linoleum on which the detective is standing. The detective does not return. The Des Plaines police investigate the disappearance of Gregory Godzik, 17, in December 1976. They knock on your door. You invite them in for coffee. You tell them Godzik told you he was running away to California. The detective writes that down. He thanks you. Godzik is 3 feet below the dining room. The detective does not return. In total, between 1972 and December 1978, 6 different police departments will visit your house in connection with 6 different missing boys. None of them will look in the crawl space. None of them will check the Iowa file. Carol Hoff divorces you on March 2nd, 1976. She has begun to notice the smell. You tell her it is a dead rat. She does not believe you. She leaves with her daughters. You are alone in the house at last. The killing accelerates. The youngest victim you take is 14, number 10 in the official sequence. His name is Samuel Stapleton, May 14th, 1976. The boy who finally ends your career is 15. His name is Robert Piest. He works at a Nissan pharmacy in Des Plaines. On December 11th, 1978, you walk into the pharmacy at 8 in the evening, and you offer him a higher-paying job at PDM. He tells his mother on the way out the door. His mother knows your name. She tells the Des Plaines police. The Des Plaines police, unlike every other jurisdiction that has ever investigated you, run your name in the Iowa state system. The Iowa system answers within 2 hours. You are placed under continuous surveillance on December 13th, 1978. 2 unmarked cars follow you for 9 days. You take them to dinner. You buy them coffee. You tell them about your construction projects. They smell something on you that they cannot place. On the night of December 21st, you invite the lead detective into your kitchen. The furnace is running. The smell rises through the floor vent. The detective steps into your bathroom and vomits. The search warrant is signed at 3 in the morning on December 22nd, 1978. The first crawl space body is recovered at 1:15 in the afternoon. By midnight, there are 8. By Christmas Eve, there are 16. By New Year's Eve, there are 26. You confess to 33 murders on December 22nd, 1978. In a continuous statement that lasts 7 hours, you are tried in Cook County Criminal Court in February 1980. Your defense is insanity. 6 different psychiatric witnesses testify for the defense. 12 different psychiatric witnesses testify for the prosecution. The jury deliberates for less than 2 hours. They convict you on every count on March 13th, 1980. You are sentenced to death by electrocution on the same day. The Illinois death penalty is later changed to lethal injection. You are sent to the Menard Correctional Center, then to Stateville. You spend the next 14 years on Illinois death row. You begin to paint clowns in your cell. You sign each canvas Pogo. You sell the paintings through a third party for as much as $20,000 apiece. A talk show host buys one and burns it on live television. You file appeal after appeal. The Illinois Supreme Court denies them all. The United States Supreme Court denies them. Your final stay is denied at 6 in the evening on May 9th, 1994. At 5 minutes past midnight on May 10th, 1994, you are walked from your cell to the lethal injection chamber at Stateville. The first chemical is administered. The IV line clogs. The execution is paused for 17 minutes while a new line is started. You are kept conscious throughout. Your last words are spoken to your defense attorney. They are "kiss my ass." They do not include a single one of the 33 boys whose names you are about to hear. Timothy McCoy, Stapleton, John Mowry, John Butkovich, Darrell Sampson, Randall Reffitt, Samuel Stapleton, Michael Bonin, William Carroll, Rick Johnston, Kenneth Parker, Michael Marino, Gregory Godzik, John Sick, John Prestige, Matthew Bowman, Robert Gilroy, John Mowry, Russell Nelson, Robert Winch, Tommy Bowling, David Talsma, William Kindred, Timothy O'Rourke, Frank Landingen, James Mazzara, Robert Piest. Outside the gates of Stateville on the night of your execution, a crowd of nearly 1,500 people has gathered. They are wearing T-shirts that read, "No Tears for the Clown." They are cheering when the warden announces the time of death. The mothers of the 33 boys you killed are watching the same news on the same television networks across America. None of them are smiling. Robert Piest's mother, Elizabeth, is in her kitchen in Des Plaines. She is 62 years old. She has waited 15 years and 4 months for this hour. She turns off the television. She goes to bed. This was your life as John Wayne Gacy.